All right, hello, welcome back. We are continuing in chapter 8 today, and we are going to be doing law of cosines. So the last couple lessons were about law of sines, and now we are going to move on to law of cosines. And you would use law of cosines specifically when you are going to start with a side angle side or a side 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 case. So in these two cases, if you tried to use law of sines, it wouldn't work. And so you would instead use the law of cosines. So here we have the law of cosines. There are three different formulas, but they are really all the same thing. So if you try to think of it in a more general way, that could help you. So for example, here, this is one that you would use if you're trying to find side C. So notice that what you do is you square and add together the other two sides, and then you do minus 2 times these ones, and then times cosine of C. So this follows the same pattern. If you're solving for B, you're just going to add up the other two sides being squared, use those same ones, and then the angle should match the side you're solving for. So if you want a more general way to remember it, that's how I would do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply law of cosines here. So we want to find the indicated side or angle. So here we're not solving the whole triangle. I just want you to practice the law of cosines to see how it works. So we're just solving for this. So to make this a little easier, let's label our triangle ABC, which would mean that this is A, this is B, and that X that we're solving for is side C. So since we're looking for side C, we would be using this first formula. But remember, they're all really, they're all the same setup. So let's write it out one time. And you definitely want to use a calculator on these, so feel free to do that. So we don't know C, we know A is going to be 24 squared plus 30 squared minus 2 times 24 times 30 times cosine of angle C, so that's cosine of 30 degrees. And I just want to point out the reason that we could not use law of sines here is because we don't have an angle with its opposite side. So we know this angle, but we don't know this side. We know this side, but we don't know this angle. So, and same for that A. So that would not work. So what you're going to do here is just type that whole thing into the calculator. So I'm going to have 24 squared plus 30 squared. Remember, your calculator will follow the order of operations. And hit enter. And I notice I'm getting a large number. That's because this is C squared. So this is equal to approximately 228.92. But we still need to take the square root of that. So when you do that, to avoid over rounding, just do the square root and then do second and then the answer button, and it will use your previous answer in there. Hit enter, and I'm getting approximately 15.1. And that's that. So that's how we use law of cosines to find a side. We can also use law of cosines to find an angle if you are given this case, side, side, side. So here we're given all three sides and we don't know any of the angles yet. And here we want to find this angle here. So you can again set up ABC. It doesn't matter how you label it. So in this case, I'm looking for angle B. So this is the only one that has an angle of B, so I'm going to choose this formula. Now, students tend to make a major calculator error on these problems, so I'm going to recommend that you solve for this before you plug in, and that's just going to save you a lot of time in the future. So I'm going to do it for just one of these, not for all of them, okay? So we'll do it with B. So I'm going to add this to both sides, and I'm going to subtract the b squared. Okay, so I'm adding this, so it ends up over here, and I'm subtracting the b squared, so it ends up over here. And now I've ended up with that. And then to solve for cosine of b, I need to divide both sides by 2ac. Okay, so we're getting a new formula based off of this one. And this one you would use when you're solving for an angle. And it would follow that same format no matter which one of these you're dealing with. So let's say you were starting with this one. Instead of cosine b, it would be cosine c. And then this would have to be a squared plus b squared minus c squared. So these two should match. And then these end up here. So the more you get comfortable with these, the problems will just go a little bit faster for you. Okay, so we're going to apply this formula here. So I have cosine b equals 12 squared plus 10 squared minus 20 squared over 2 times a times c. Now, if you want to type this whole thing into the calculator, there are a couple things to keep in mind. So, one is you could find this first, and then you're going to have to do inverse cosine of that to get b. Okay, so b is going to be inverse cosine of that whole thing. Or you could just type the whole thing in straight away, but sometimes that gets a little bit complicated. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to find the numerator first. Also, I'm not setting a good example. If they're numbers that you know, to avoid calculator error, I would say like 144 plus 100. Like you could type it in like that. I'm going to hit enter. That's the numerator. And then I'm going to divide by, you guys, you have to put parentheses around the denominator. 2 times 12 times 10. Oh god, I got an extra parenthesis. Enter. Now this is going to look different from if I just want to show you so you don't make the mistake. This is not, you guys cannot see this very well. Okay, well hopefully you can see it well enough. If I had just typed in 12 squared plus 10 squared minus 20 squared divided by 2 times 12 times 10, you get a very different answer. Negative 23,000. Here I'm getting negative 0.65. Okay, that's because your calculator follows the order of operations, so be careful. Be careful. Okay, so now I'm going to get this one back. So then I need to do inverse cosine of that answer. Inverse cosine of that, and I'm getting 130.5 degrees. So this is how you find law of cosines to, how you use law of cosines to find a side. This is how you use law of cosines to find an angle. So now we're just going to practice both of these situations, like all the way through. So we're going to use the law of cosines to solve SAS triangle. So side, angle, side. We're going to solve the whole triangle. Okay, let's see how to do it. So I do like to draw my triangles, and I'm gonna have, I'm gonna label this one a little different. I'm gonna do A, B, C. I'm putting C here just because I can see that C is bigger than B. I don't know. It doesn't matter. You do not have to draw these to scale. A is 35 degrees. Side C is 8. Side B is 5. So I'm in the situation side angle side, and I have to use law of cosines. Okay, so we need to start because we're given angle A, that's the side that we have to find. So you have to start by finding the missing side first. We cannot find an angle yet. We have to find the missing side first. Find missing side, which in this case is side A, which means I'm going to use this formula. Now I'm going to plug right into that. And I'm going to type that whole thing into my calculator. Oops. And again, that is not the answer. Okay, this is 23. That's a squared. So now we have to do the square root of that. And I'm getting approximately 4.8. Now, remember 4.8 is very much a rounded answer. So you don't have to, but it's going to be better, much better, if you don't use the rounded answer when you proceed in these types of problems. So I'll show you what I mean. So here we're going to say A is approximately 4.8. Now we need to find still, I forgot to put the little box here, but we can see what we still need to find. So we have side A, so we need to find angles B and C. Now, it's going to be better if you find the one that's going to be a smaller angle. So between B and C, which angle will be smaller? Well, the smaller angle has to be across from the smaller side. So I'm going to find B, and I'm going to choose to use law of sines. You could use law of cosines, but law of sines is just, I think, a little faster. You should get the same thing. Okay, so again, pick the smaller one between the two. That way you don't have to worry about the ambiguous case coming up, okay? So, not really the ambiguous case. I'm being very vague. I apologize. It's early in the morning. So, let's do this. Okay, so we're going to find side angle B. So we're going to do sine of B over 5 equals sine of 35 degrees over A, which we just found is 4.8. But when I do this in my calculator, I'm not going to type in 4.8. I am going to use that value in the calculator, and I'll show you how to do that. So I need to multiply both sides by 5 here. And then we need to do inverse sine of that whole thing. Okay, so when we do this, here's how it's going to look. I'm going to do inverse sine of 5 times sine of 35 divided by, and instead of typing 4.8, I'm going to use my previous answer. Now, I know last time I didn't do this. This is the better way to do it. So you can either scroll up, highlight it, and hit enter, or do the same thing. Second answer. And I'm getting 36 point, if you round this, 0.3, 36.3. So B is approximately 36.3. Now, let's just see what we would have gotten if we, I'm just curious, if we didn't use the stored answer. We would have gotten inverse sine 5 times sine of 35 divided by 4.8. 36.7. So it can be a little bit off, as you can see. It's not that far off. I don't know why this. Ooh, magic. Okay, so 36.3 versus 36.7 are two fairly different answers. Anyway, that's the better way to do it. Don't stress too much about it. Now I found angle B, and then the last thing I need to find is angle A. So to better explain the reason that I chose to do the smaller angle here is because I know that the smaller angle, there's no way that the smaller angle is going to be an obtuse angle, right? Because you can only have one obtuse angle in a triangle. Remember, obtuse means greater than 90 degrees. You can only have one that's greater than 90 degrees. So here we don't have to worry about the or blank because this is going to be greater than 90 degrees, and it is impossible for B to be greater than 90 degrees. If you were finding C here, well, C is the biggest side. So since C is the biggest angle, it might be obtuse. So you're going to have to figure out which one of these it is. So to avoid that, find the smaller angle, and then you don't have to worry about that part. Okay, so 3, find the last angle, and you guys know how to do this now. You're going to do 180 minus 35 minus 36.3 degrees. And we get 108.7. So that is angle C. And so we've solved the triangle. So if you want to organize your work, you could do the whole like this. But sorry, I forgot to put those there. Okay, final hold on a different sheet of paper. Okay, final problem. Hopefully my computer doesn't die. Now, here we're in side, side, side. So side A, 6, side B, 8, and side C is 5. So here, there are a couple different ways you could do this. So we're going to start by finding one of the sides. So let's find, I don't know, let's find side, angle C, sorry, angle, not side. So we're going to use, remember we're solving for an angle here, so I'm going to set this up. It's going to be, cosine of C is going to be equal to A squared plus B squared minus C squared divided by 2AB. And I'm getting that from the formulas on the other paper. And then we're going to plug right into this. So we're going to have 6 squared plus 8 squared minus 5 squared divided by 2 times 6 times 8. And then C is going to equal inverse cosine of that. So let's figure out what that is. Okay, so I'm going to do 36 plus 64 minus 25. So I'm just squaring them in my head. Divided, oh, this is another way to type it in. Just use parentheses. And then I need to do inverse cosine. I'm sorry that this is not really showing up. Inverse cosine of that answer, which was 0.78-ish. So I'm getting 38.6. Okay. Now, I mean, you kind of have an option. You could use law of sines if you wanted to, or you can just do law of cosines again. Let's do law of cosines again. You pick, doesn't matter. So this one's going to have to be, okay, so the first two that add are the ones that are not b. So it's going to be a squared plus c squared, and then you subtract the same letter. And then you divide by 2 times these ones, but not squared. Now plug everything in. So this is going to be 6 squared plus 5 squared minus 8 squared divided by 2 times 6 times 5. And b is going to be inverse cosine of that. So here I have 36 plus 25 minus 64 divided by 2 times 6 times, oh god, see, I forgot the parentheses. That will give you the wrong answer. 2 times 6 times 5. I'm getting negative 0.05, and now I need to do inverse cosine of that answer, and I'm getting 92.86, which I'm going to round to 92.9. And if I know two angles, I can find my third angle. So then A, right, they have to all add up to 180 degrees. So if you use law of cosines, you don't have to worry about like finding the biggest one or the smallest one first, like you did with law of sines. But to be clear, you could have started with cosines and then done sines. It does not matter. And that's how you do it. So your homework's a handout. As always, I'm available if you have questions. Hope you're doing well. Talk to you soon.